Service. What is up, listeners? Welcome back to another episode of the Full Service Podcast. I am Tank Smith, your host. Today is episode 62. Thanks for being here. Shout out to my guests from last week, Domina, Delilah Bliss. Delilah, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. That was so much fun. If you have not yet, check out last week's episode. Make sure you're following Delilah. She is on Twitter at mrian19. Her website is dominadelilahshears.us. I have a link to both her Twitter, her website, and the Libsyn page from last week, so make sure you hit that Libsyn page. Show her some love. As always, you can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, at Full Service Pod. I am at Tank Funkadelic. If you enjoy the show, if you like what we're doing here, make sure you hit that like button, that follow button, that subscribe button. You will be alerted as soon as a new episode drops. Ratings and reviews really do help for visibility for the podcast, so if you could, hit us with a 5-star rating, write us a review. That would help us out so much. Today, episode 62, so excited. My guests are partners, Portland-based pro-doms, companions, Riley Delacroix and Cameron Beaumont. We recorded, I guess it's been like a couple weeks ago. I think it was like the week like right before Halloween. So it's been like 3 weeks ago, but I'm so excited for y'all to hear this. We discussed their start in sex work in rural New Mexico, moving to New Orleans, being in a relationship and working together as partners, moving to Portland during the height of lockdown during the pandemic, how being pro-doms influences their companionships, and why sex work is so needed during the pandemic. I enjoyed this conversation so much. You can follow Riley on Twitter at Riley Delacroix1, and Cameron, she is at Cameron B PDX. Their website is girlfriendsexperiencepdx.com. I will have a link to their Twitter, their website, and the Libsyn page from this week, so make sure you hit that Libsyn page, give them a follow. I'm going to stop talking. I really hope you enjoy this interview with Riley Delacroix and Cameron Beaumont. Thanks. Welcome back, listeners. It's Tank Smith. I'm excited, so excited for today's episode. My guests today, they are partners, Portland-based companions, pro-doms, Riley Delacroix and Cameron Beaumont. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us. We're really glad to be here.
Heck yeah, I'm glad we can make this happen. This is awesome. You're based in Portland, right?
Yeah, we live in Portland now, formerly of New Orleans, and then before that,
sweet.
In New Mexico as well. And we worked in all of those places.
Oh, nice, awesome. Can you remember the first time you think you heard of sex work at all?
I think we've all heard of sex work. I feel like we've had to translate the idea of sex work. Like, I heard of whores, I heard of prostitutes, I heard of hookers from the time I was a child. By the way, I grew up in Nevada, where being a hooker was legal.
Nice.
And still is. And I fucking love all those people who do that work. It's amazing. I remember driving past brothels as a child and being like, somebody in my family would be like, oh, that's the hooker, that's the whorehouse, that's the hooker joint. And it was so weird. And I was like, what happens in there? What are those women doing? And it was so shamed, right? It never translated to me being like, this is what I want to do when I grow up. But it was still fascinating to me, even when I was like 8 years old in the back of a car.
Yeah.
I'd say for me, it was a little different. Like, I think for most of us, like, our first exposure to it is through media. And it's often like a misrepresentation. Like, it's like Pretty Woman or some bullshit like that. But I think my like real time exposure to sex work, like as both a vocation and a calling, was, I basically became an adult in San Francisco, and which was much more sex positive. There was places like the Lusty Lady and places like that were cooperatively owned, women and queer owned, and things like that. And so I think that's through queer culture and through feminist culture was how I first kind of came into the idea of sex work being both work and something to be respected.
How did you start? How did you get into sex work? How did you start in companionship? What's your path into it?
Well, I mean, for both of us, it was like being in a relationship being sex positive, what we found is we found ourselves in like really rural America one day.
The
And
best
we
place to be.
had,
Yeah.
and we had like minimal income, even though we were both highly educated and had come from big cities before that. We tried to move out into the middle of nowhere just to be like ourselves or to try to find ourselves, etc.
To be
Yeah, to be
closer to
closer to
land.
nature and land and all these things. And then we realized, oh shit, but we can't make any money out here
Yeah.
except if we drive miles and miles or hours and hours. And so I think the first thing that happened was one day I was like, "Hey, Riley, did you realize that people could sell dirty underwear on the internet?"
That was the first
That
thing.
was
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
first
That was the
thing.
first thought.
Hell yeah.
Um, yeah,
And
you just have to understand, like, it's, and I feel like a lot of people are really feeling this right now with the pandemic and stuff like that. Like, we're both highly educated, highly skilled people who have held multiple forms of professional positions. And just the way the economy is structured, where we were living, like, we were chronically, like, underemployed, and we were just like no matter how hard we worked, like, under the current system, like, we just kind of couldn't make it, you know what I mean? Like, we felt like we were on a hamster wheel just like everybody else, just trying to make ends meet. And so we sat there, at this time in rural New Mexico, under this beautiful fucking mountain. It was just like, the most amazing sunsets I've ever seen in my entire life, and I've been all over the world. And we were just kind of like, what are we going to do? Like, I don't want to keep endeavoring like this. What skills do we have? Like, what other things could we do to support ourselves and support our future, but also that would be like fulfilling and fun? And then, like, Cameron came up with this idea, and then it was like, wait a second, like, we're already like kinky, adventurous people. Like, what about sex work? And it was really Cameron's idea first, and I kind of came into like a lot of curiosity about it. But that's kind of how it started. It was this sort of like, the system's kind of fucked, and like, we want to have a little bit of autonomy over our lives, and like, we want to do things that we enjoy, that we feel brings like pleasure and healing to people.
I feel like that's such like that's a just like a powerful decision to like I guess change the direction of your life and say I want to go in a new direction and just like create have such an impact on people. I think it's awesome.
yeah, I mean, politically right now it's such a tumultuous time, and especially if you're a person who spends a lot of time on social media, and the social media that's like surrounding sex work and queerness. We talk about SWERFs, which are sex work exclusionary radical
Oh
feminists,
yeah.
who are people who believe that people who get into sex work are only people who are desperate for their lives and would die otherwise and are subject to capitalism and are only doing sex work because they're desperate and otherwise their life would be terrible.
What a
We got
popular
into
storyline.
Yeah.
it's fucking terrible, and that is not the reason that we ever got into sex work, even though like any swerf out there in the world could have like swerved our story already. Yeah, we were living in the middle of nowhere and we had limited opportunities to work, but we are both highly educated people and we fucking chose to not ride the capitalism wave. We could have drove 3 hours to go to work and make a minimal amount of money to put a roof over our head, or we could have sold dirty panties, or we could have become pro doms, or we could have become full service workers like we are now. And we did that in a choice because we realized that a lot of the time during the initial times that we were full-time sex workers, we were also working other jobs. But then we would come home from our like full-time jobs and be like, okay, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Why
I
would
could
we
have
do
made,
that?
I could have made the same amount of money that I spent all day in my office, like in an hour with somebody. And it would have been a lot more interesting
And
to like
fulfilling.
fulfilling to
And
like learn about somebody else and help bring them pleasure or authenticity in their life for an hour.
I feel
Because
like it's like not a yeah, it's like why would I not do that?
yeah,
yeah, it's like, I feel like I wish I could line up like every single person who questions, though sometimes desperation creates sex workers. Like, even if you take the sex worker part of it, like, desperation creates innovation and necessity and all these other things. This is how we evolve as human beings, right?
No,
And
definitely.
that's where it came for us. It was not desperation created us to be walking the streets and being slaves to a terrible patriarchal system. It was actually us being like, fuck this system, actually. And we are worth our weight in gold. And people believe that because they see us and they value our time and they value the service that we give them.
Fuck yeah. Did you start working in New Mexico?
we did. Yeah, it was a lot more difficult there, though. Like we said, we lived really rurally. And then most people who come through New Mexico, they either go to Albuquerque or Santa Fe. And those are still like Santa Fe was like an hour and a half away. Albuquerque was like 2.5 hours away. Like it was really difficult to make it worth the time and the effort of like commuting down to these places to make it convenient for a client. I mean, we did live near like a popular tourist destination, so seasonally people might come through. But we started in New Mexico. That was like kind of like our prototype, if you will. But I would really say that the vast majority of our sex work experience before we moved to Portland was in New Orleans. Like much more of our stories and us finding ourselves as sex workers and growing and evolving was really, it's a story that's set in New Orleans for sure.
How was New Orleans?
It was amazing. It was rough. It's New Orleans is an incredible place. There's no place like it, and it's a very difficult place. You know, how is New Orleans? I like to call New Orleans like the karmic accelerator. It's a place where, there's this friend of ours, a spirit worker. He said, New Orleans, she's the city that's built on the dead. And you know what she does? She shows you all the shit that you haven't looked at, and you either turn and face it or it consumes you. And
Damn,
that's
that's
true.
powerful.
That shit is true about New Orleans. And but it's also a place known for like openness, and like you can go and you can like do stuff that you can't do other places. Like there's a beauty and a permissiveness about New Orleans where like, you can just kind of be whoever you are and people don't give a fuck, you know?
Yeah. How is I imagine the sex work community in New Orleans is a lot different than rural New Mexico. How is that? How was that difference?
There is no community in
Yeah.
rural New
Yeah, I
Mexico.
mean, I don't even know that there's actually, I don't want to say that there's no community. I know that there's no community in rural New Mexico, but I sure as shit like question whether there's even other sex workers. It's like that. It's that bad.
No,
This is the reason why when we would drive 3 hours to go to Albuquerque, because we were at that time literally the only people doing pro dom work,
Oh wow.
our knowledge, in the state of New Mexico. Like, unless they were, I don't know, advertising in the newspaper or something. But um, when we went to New Orleans, part of that reason was actually connected through a sex worker community. We knew as sex workers in New Mexico that we needed to have community and to be able to support one another. We had come into sex work in like a very educated way and knowing our safety boundaries and stuff that like we might get into talking about a little later in the podcast. But like, it was not fulfilling our heart.
well, they're also
But when we
in.
went to when we went to New Orleans, we showed up in New Orleans, and almost immediately the sex worker community there just said, come to this potluck for sex workers. And we all just hung out and we shared stories and we laughed and we said, oh, maybe we could do duos together. Oh, wow, you guys are doing really great work. Okay, wait, what's your Twitter handle? How can I follow you? Like, it was so beautiful. And to this point, and I don't want to say we just haven't gotten a chance to meet anybody in Portland because of we've just moved up here and it's COVID and everything's
It
on
is
lockdown.
COVID.
But I can at least acknowledge that the sex work community in New Orleans is on par with the social, spiritual way that people feel in New Orleans. It's like you are home, everyone accepts you, everyone's got your back, and you always have a place to go and you always have someone to call.
That's
You always
awesome.
have someone to dance with in the street.
I wish I had somebody to dance with in the street. It's hard to find that person.
I mean,
Well, go to New Orleans, yes, because you can find a whole bunch of
I mean,
strangers.
or come to Portland because we've been in New Orleans. We'll
Yeah,
play. We will play some speakers, and you can come dance on our lawn.
yeah.
Hell
We
yeah.
do it all the time.
Yeah,
Fuck
we
yeah.
bring a lot of New Orleans. We brought a lot of New Orleans culture with us to the Pacific Northwest, and it at first, I mean, it as it said, we arrived here at the height of quarantine. It was like hard quarantine when we got to Portland, and like everyone, we were trying to figure out like how are we going to stay sane, how are we going to stay well, like around all the anxiety and uncertainty about what was going to happen, and like having come from New Orleans, like it was like, well, if you don't know what the fuck to do, you dance or
Yeah.
something. We'd like blast some big brass music on the lawn and go fucking dance out on the lawn, and just like trying to bring that spirit of like, okay, we can't be together like in the ways that we're used to, but we can still like be together, and we can try to celebrate being alive despite things being real fucked up right now,
Yeah. That's awesome. I feel like, fuck yeah. Everyone's like, oh, they moved from New Orleans, got that fucking big brass playing. That's, yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's and so yeah, like we really look forward to getting closer to the sex worker community here. We've met some folks, we've had, socially distanced hangouts on our lawn and stuff like that. And there is a lot of like there's a very like developed mutual aid community up here, especially for sex workers. And so you do see like across social media, like sex workers helping out other sex workers. Cause like you're not going to go and get unemployment money for
No.
work. You're not going to get special pandemic assistance for sex work. Like all we have is each other. And so, we raise money to help people pay for their rent, to help them with toiletries, like all their basic needs. It's tight knit. Like I think anywhere you go, it just has a different flavor in different places.
Yeah, yeah. We can't wait to lick the flavor of Portland sex workers
In all
Fuck
the
yeah.
in all the ways.
way.
Because luckily for us, when we fell into New Orleans, we fell into this like soft nest of people who were super like we were living in a different time than we are now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and people were like, great, come over, let's meet each other, let's do things together. And it's a being in the South, I think this, being in Atlanta, being in the South, I don't know how much time you've spent in the Pacific Northwest, but it's a totally different culture than being up here.
Oh, yeah. And I've never been to the Pacific North. I want to go.
Come on up. We'll
Yeah.
give you a discount.
Yeah. We'll be here.
But it's a totally different emotional and social culture here than being in the South, like in terms of flexibility and
Just
and and
openness,
and
warmth.
warmth. Like
Yeah.
there's a sweetness about the South that that's why you could walk up to anyone's porch and they'll give you sweet tea. It's like that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? And it doesn't happen here. It doesn't, like, the culture up here is different. And I'm not saying that about the sex workers. I'm saying it about the over culture.
Yeah.
Because I think all sex workers, regardless of where they live, are extremely interconnected and badass. I had, like, recently, to give an example, like, of something like this, like, just so you know, all you clients who might be listening to this podcast, like, sex workers have their networks. Sex workers have each other's backs regardless of what fucking city they live in. And if you give a reference, we have each other's backs. And I had a recent client who screened really well and just sent me an email, like in a pretty last minute way, and said, "Hey, I want to meet up with you. Here's my two references of people I've seen. I'd love to see you like in within a couple of hours." And I texted both of those sex workers right off the bat and I said, "Hey, have you met this person?" They said they know you. They said they've seen you. And right away they said, "Yeah, he's a nice guy. He's really cool. I've seen him a couple times. Like, have fun,
Hell
enjoy
yeah.
your, you know?" And it doesn't matter where you live, but it's also like strange to be in a different overculture than we were in New Orleans because
Well, I mean, especially moving too, like at the height of COVID,
absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I
it's
think
like you're moving into like a shutdown area. It's like it's not alive when it was, but it's like it just changed a little bit.
for sure. And we've had to take other precautions, obviously, and take time between clients, offer COVID testing. Like, it's just the landscape has been completely changed beyond any of our control, and so all of these things are things that have to be taken into consideration that weren't a thing before. Before it was just safer sex practices and like keeping yourself safe legally and physically, but it's more than that now. Like, everybody's got a different sense of skin in the game. But the thing that I would say that's really unique and significant about this time is that everyone is starved for touch, is starved for intimacy, is starved for pleasure in this time. And like that, like, level of isolation and like lack of those needs getting met, like, I feel like we talk about this a lot about how like that's going to kill more people than COVID, in the long run, and so we feel okay about continuing to do sex work, especially during this time, because it's so needed right now, like even more so than before.
Definitely. I know there's like people that work at home that have been used to interacting with 50 people a day, and now it's literally their computer.
Yeah.
And it's like I need that human interaction. I need that human touch that I'm not getting at all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you being
I,
able to provide that it's amazing.
I mean, I had a client recently who, like, another human hadn't touched him in like 6 months. Like, could you imagine like not being touched for 6 months? And it just like it blew me away, and it was like it just like it was so clear what an honor it was to be like trusted with that, and that I could fulfill like a very, very significant, essential, and sacred human need for this person.
Yeah. And especially like going so long, I feel like feel like you like know when people kind of touch you after having not been touched for so long like that. Like I feel like I remember go to the airport and getting felt up like literally by a TSA agent. I was like, holy shit, nobody's touched my dick in so long. Like that's the TSA. I was like, wow.
It's a
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
it
Thing.
it's like the other thing that I find really interesting about these times is like sort of dovetailing off of what Riley said was like I think people haven't been touched in a long time, and so they're having to spend a lot of time with themselves, and they're having to spend a lot of time with like, what is it that I want? What is it that if I risked myself for COVID or my family or whoever is in my life for an experience, like what would that experience be like? And
Yeah.
what would I be asking for? And that's a really big thing for us. And we're finding really interesting differences because, like, when we lived in New Orleans, it was sort of just like, well, I'm in town. We should have fun. Woo!
Yeah.
And
Well, I
now,
have a different story about that, but yeah, please continue.
and now I feel like people are, in my experience, like being a little bit more discerning, and like the people who reach out to me and us are like, well, I haven't had any touch, and I find myself really connected to you, and or I haven't had an experience where I've gotten to be with two people, so if I'm gonna have an experience, I might as well be with two of y'all. Fuck it,
Yeah.
go for it. And it's like, some people are going for intensity, some people are going for intimacy, some people are looking at like, oh, maybe I'm queer, maybe like I'm curious about trans people, or um BDSM or whatever. But like they're because they've gotten to had to spend time with themselves, they have to question, like, what is it that I really actually want?
Yeah.
And what is it that I really actually need? And I think that, like, one of the beauty of these times is that people are having to, like, really ask themselves that thing is like, what do I really fucking want right now? Like, what do I need? What do I want? What am I craving? What have I never had in my life? And you know what? If I got COVID tomorrow, I wouldn't feel sad about dying tomorrow because I got that yesterday.
Yeah.
And we're finding a lot of like different ways in which people are reaching out to us, because I think being in quarantine and being in isolation is really like provoking people to be in a space where they're having to actually question, what
Have
do
you
they want?
have both of y'all had to do that as well, where you're like thinking like, what is what is the path forward, or what do I want to do?
Certainly. I mean, well, one thing I wanted to riff on, just that was, I agree with Cameron completely about this being like a really unique pivot time where people are really like both self-evaluating but also evaluating systems in our world, and how is our world actually going and how could it be different. I know for me, this is, and especially in New Orleans as a trans person, I got a lot of clients who were much older,
Okay.
and it was kind of like they were kind of like got to that age where they're like, I've been thinking about this for 20 years, and what the fuck am I waiting for? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, or like even young people, like I'd have young guys who like maybe watched porn or something, and they were like, I'm not sure I'm into it or not, but like I want to find out. And I deeply respected both of those like classes of people who are like, I'm going to give myself an experience so that I can explore my authenticity. And some people were really into it, and they're like, wow, I'm so glad that I finally did that. I don't know why I waited so long. Or like I had some people who were like, yeah, I'm glad I tried that. I found out it wasn't my thing, but I'm glad that I did it. And I was like, cool. Like I'm glad that I got to help you figure that out. You can
Fuck
cross
yeah.
that
That's
off your
awesome.
list. You
Yeah.
didn't have to like try to go meet somebody at a bar or some shit and like have some awkward experience. Like you literally got to have the experience that you thought you wanted, and then you got to evaluate how it worked for you.
Yeah.
And that felt really good to me. Like what we do, like even though it can be pleasurable and certainly enjoyable and interesting for us, it's still service. I mean, we are there in service to people's sexual and sensual authenticity. And if their authenticity is like, I tried that and it wasn't for me, then like great. Success.
Yeah.
You know?
You
Or
found
maybe
out a little bit more about yourself through
yeah,
me.
or maybe you tried something new that you had no idea you'd ever be into, and you like found out that you were real fucking into it, like success. Great.
Yeah. You're just like helping people find out more about themselves.
Yeah, we're in the business of celebrating people's authenticity.
Hell
And say
yeah.
fuck all the time.
Yeah, we say fuck all the time. Yeah.
I do as
We're
well.
full on potty mouths.
That's the best way to be. That's the only way to be. Coming from New Orleans, where you're like already established, kind of like moving to Portland, was there any fear, like in terms of like, is like, am I gonna have the same number of clients? Or people gonna be receptive to me as a provider? Was there any fear of that moving from New Orleans to Portland?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because we had moved from Albuquerque down to New Orleans from New Mexico, um, we sort of knew the game. Like at that time, we didn't really know. how to do it in advance, even though we knew we were going to move there in advance. And so coming up here, we planned this move trip, etc., prior to quarantine happening. And so we were like, okay, we're going to put out travel ads. We had been doing the work long enough to know that we needed to sort of
You were advertising in Portland like a long time before you moved.
yeah, we had trajected ourselves into in a certain way, saying we're coming there and here's the dates, etc. um and but then we still got here and it was like walking around
Like a dystopian ghost town.
yeah,
Like we,
ghost town.
like
It
we
was like,
thought,
okay, cool. Yeah, we just spent like $700 on like traveling ads, and still like no one even looked us up because everyone was hiding in their house
yeah,
and
Yeah.
it was,
nobody was walking down the streets,
yeah, it
and
was a
it was
real
weird.
loss. We were gonna, because we had planned sort of when we were originally gonna move up before the coronavirus really hit. We were gonna kind of do a meandering like work trip. Like we were gonna do this road trip,
Oh,
like
nice.
through the South, through Texas, through Colorado, through New Mexico, through Idaho, and like we were thinking about like, well, what if we met people there and did work there, and like offered something that's not usually on the table in these places. Like this was the original plan, and all that obviously went to shit. Like we had to. New Orleans, we were reading the news and it was 10 o'clock at night one night, and we had plans maybe to move the next week or so, next 2 weeks. And we read in the news and we realized, holy shit, like New Orleans is slated to be the next epicenter of the virus right
Oh
after
God.
New York City. It's like, we got to get the fuck out of here. And like we were gone like 3 days later, and like sleeping in the back of a U-Haul so that we didn't have to go into a hotel. And like, we were driving through the South and we were the only people wearing masks at gas stations, and it was just a really trippy fucking time. And
Yeah.
then we
Yeah,
arrived
our
here.
tour was off.
Yeah, it went off.
We didn't get to cancel it. It was just off. We planned and advertised for a tour through Houston, through Dallas, through Denver, through Boise, and then immediately it was like
Nope.
canceled.
No,
We're just going to
we're
Portland and
just
we'll
getting
figure
through.
out from there.
We're just getting through. Just like everybody else, like we found ourselves in a strange and unpredictable situation, just like everyone, and just kind of had to adapt and do our best given the circumstances.
Yeah, I feel like everything changed for everybody in a couple days. And then
Absolutely.
and then people just had to fucking adjust on the fly. Like what the fuck is this new world? Well, I guess we gotta do something. It's not
Yeah.
gonna stop.
And we're still doing that, like, but we talk a lot and use a lot of with we have great concern about the trauma that is in all of our bodies as a result of this experience. And that's not just like the chronic lack of touch and physical intimacy and sexuality, but like we are starting to fear other people's bodies, in a way that we didn't before. Like we were watching a movie that was made, in the 90s or something, and the person was like, a character was like standing over another character super close and they're looking at a computer screen and we're like, holy shit, you're too close,
I know.
you know? And it was like this creepy, creepy sensation of like, oh my God, like I get to touch people for money, and yet that's still in my body. Like that's in all of our bodies. Like so we're going to need so much somatics based healing as we come out of this as a culture.
Yeah,
And I think
definitely.
sex workers play a very special role in that.
Oh, 100%. Like without a doubt. Because people are gonna need connection, and you're not able to get that like currently, and who knows how long. And it's like the only way is through sex work or other like I don't know therapy, but it's hard right now without like human connection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you see it, I see people's spirits wither.
Yeah, I've done a like I guess I've mentioned I guess in Portland, so there's a strip club, Lucky Devil Lounge,
Hmm.
that did a like drive-through strip club. I've mentioned on the podcast a few times.
Yeah, I mean, there's more strippers per capita in Portland than there is in any other city in the country. So
Really, even more than Atlanta. Atlanta's a strip club
yeah, yeah,
capital.
yeah. Hail the sex workers. There's more strippers per capita in Portland, more strip clubs per capita in Portland than in any other city in the US.
Yeah,
That's
and
incredible.
they're organizing. You
Yeah, they're
know,
organizing and they're like very social justice oriented.
Did you happen to go to the drive-through strip club?
We did
yeah,
not.
not yet.
Okay, okay, cool.
I
We
don't think so. Happening.
we
Oh my God, what it's today? So Thursday. So Lucky Devil Lounge, they got it Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It's called like I think it's called like Hell to Go Go.
Cute.
They're like the drive-through strip clubs coming back Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, like literally this weekend.
I mean, I guess we gotta go
Go on a date.
because
Lucky Devil Lounge, you got to drive through, and they got like, oh my God, it's amazing. You guys
yeah,
actually live there, so you could go.
we could. And both of us love strippers. We love sex workers of all of all identities. We danced burlesque when we were in New Orleans, which is different than stripping. But we also had a shit ton of stripper friends there, and it's totally different work. It's totally different work than camming and being full service workers. It's different than being pro doms, but that's the way in which like we support each other, is to actually support each other.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I can't say I've ever been at a lot of strip clubs in this town, but I've lived here a bit of time, and I'm happy to drive through and have someone rub their titties in my face because
I think it's like I think there's a 6 foot distance, but I mean, it still would be great. Y'all should
I don't
definitely,
care.
y'all should definitely go. How is it being in a relationship together and also working together as like work partners?
I think I think it's a real gift. I have super deep respect for people who are in relationships with sex workers and not sex workers themselves. Like I think that's pretty impressive and difficult to do because being a sex worker and being in a relationship with a sex worker, like you know what it's like, you know? Like
Yeah,
you can come back and like you talk the same language, like you might have had similar experiences. You can really hold space for the other person, celebrate the other person, like laugh about like fun and crazy shit that happened, that sort of thing. And then like working together, I mean, you get like paid to fuck your partner, you know? Like that's pretty cool.
that's really cool.
Yeah,
That's more than pretty cool.
take
What?
you know, and it's like we did a last minute double session last night and I was just like looking at Cameron, I'm like, God, you were like the hottest fucking person I know. Like it's just so cool to be able to do that and you're like, and I'm getting paid and I get to like help this other person have a beautiful experience and like enjoy this person that I respect and love and admire.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the one difficulty that we had or that we've had around it at different times is like there's been different times when one of us has been in a position to work more than the other.
Okay,
There's like a certain imbalance that has shifted over time and like has come and gone and you know, it can be hard like it can be hard on like the self-esteem or like you know, I don't know, like if you're the one staying at home while the other person's going a lot or vice versa, like there are different emotional challenges that come with that. And it's an opportunity for a lot of like shadow work as well of like, why do I feel this way? Or like, why am I resentful? Why am I jealous? Or why do I feel sad or depressed? Or, you know,
yeah.
like it's an opportunity for learning more about yourself and kind of delving into those emotions.
Did you both start work like around the same time? What's your, I guess, did y'all both start around, like, I guess, in sex work together, separately? What was your timeline, I guess?
We both started like joking back to the dirty panties story. P.S. Do you want to buy our dirty panties? Because they're always on sale. um, but we have this like really dynamic relationship where I tend to come up with ideas and Riley tends to help manifest them.
That's a
And
perfect combination.
it's a perfect combination. And so, I mean, if we're looking on a technical timeline, we probably started at the same time. But um, do I think Riley would have ever been a sex worker if I didn't say something first? Probably not. They'd have probably just gone on their way. Um, but like it's a great thing because that's the way in which like we work as a couple is like, hey, should we be pro doms? Because we already are kinky people, and someone might pay us if we're pro doms, and we're really good at what we do, and we're really respectful, and that's how we started out. And initially, I was doing a lot of the work just because I don't know, maybe the culture of New Mexico. I don't really know, but we spent a lot of time before we even endeavored in sex work at all researching and making sure that we understood how to be safe
Oh,
because
okay.
so many safety issues around being sex workers. And I think that's honestly like why we chose to be pro doms first because we actually weren't trading illegal things for money.
Yeah, yeah. It's legal.
Right.
Yeah.
It's illegal to beat someone's ass for money, but it's not legal to fuck someone for money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we had to that's why we chose to be pro doms for several years.
Yeah. Yeah, I give total credit to Cameron for kind of being the inspiration factory, if you will, both around this and around a lot of other like co-working endeavors that we do. They like get these really great downloads, and then we talk about them. We're both like, "Yeah, that's a fucking awesome idea." And then like I kind of come in and be like, "Okay, well then how are we gonna do that? You know, like what does that look like to actually like make that, or how do we want to make that?"
I mean, you
Uh,
need an idea person and a logistics person, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Cameron certainly did a lot of logistics too, like a lot of the research around screening and around safety and all of that stuff. Like Cameron's really good at finding information. I'm really good at creating things and building relationships and finding connections. You know, Cameron has amazing aesthetic. You know, and we just kind of would go back and forth, and you know, all of our stuff is self-made, you know, like we made our websites, we like made connections and got our photos, like we do all of our own writing, like everything we put on social media is us. Like there's nobody writing shit for us or anything like that. Like we are as authentic as possible in how we present ourselves because we want to be in sex work so we can be ourselves
Yeah.
and we connect with people because we are us, and like we want you to be yourself, we want you to be your fullest self, and that can only happen if everybody's authenticity is on the table, you know.
Yeah. I feel like people pick up on authenticity, and when they feel that from you, it's like a real, like, they connect with that, you
It's
know?
a real thing, you
Yeah.
know, like we've heard a lot of stories basically when people get in the room with us either individually or collectively, they're just like like what the fuck, you know, like because
Yeah.
anybody and I don't know, like I don't wanna put anybody down of any kind. Like, I have no judgment about, like, folks doing sex work for whatever reason they need to. But there's a difference between, like, doing it and, like, not wanting to do it and, like, kinda having to do it to survive versus, like, this is also a calling and I feel really passionate about this and really creative about it. There's a whole completely different atmosphere to both of those experiences. Uh,
And also like if it wasn't clear, we're probably like the latter of what Riley said was like we're people who feel extremely passionate about this work and we don't have to do this work. We could go get jobs that capitalism would kill us over, but we choose to do this work every day. And we also do a shit ton of work to advocate for and send money to people who are in this work because they have to be
Mm-hmm.
and or who are harmed in being in this work, and who are victims of trafficking and all of the things in which prevents decriminalization of our work.
Yeah.
It's so hard to explain, and I wish we had like a table for 3 hours like in the Supreme Court just so we could explain sex work to all of the people. But the thing is, like, all we do is care for people and we meet their needs. And sometimes we don't even fuck people. Sometimes we don't even touch people because all we need to do is be in the room with people.
Yeah.
And, other times we fill people's deepest fantasies of their entire life so that they could literally die and feel like I checked off my whole bucket list.
See, that's
And
fucking special. Like, that's fucking
Yeah,
so dope.
yeah, and it is fucking awesome. And also there's a lot of people forced into and or doing sex work not by their own volition, and it we owe money and give money and advocate for ways in which those people that get targeted by swerfs, like we talked about in our previous conversation, previous
Yeah.
conversation, and then we get like bubbled into the whole thing of like all y'all are just people who are just only doing this work because you can't do something else. I could do something else. I can damn well tell you I could get a job tomorrow. I just choose not to because I fucking love the work that I do, and I love how I can take care of people, and I love advocating for and showing up for people alongside Riley and alongside my queer community and my sex work community, and it's beautiful fucking work.
yeah. I want to give like some examples of this. Like, for example, we danced burlesque in New Orleans, just as like a pastime. It was kind of fun. Like, yeah, it does like kind of feed into the work and kind of like can get kind of performative and fun. But like, when I did my number, they give tips. If you're not familiar with burlesque culture, like you give a lot, like people in the audience give a lot of tips,
Oh, okay.
as you're dancing and
Like
as like
strippers.
you're stripping, because it is stripping. It's performance and it's stripping. And it's just not in a strip club. It's at like a performance space or a bar or something like that.
Okay.
And I had them announce that like all of the proceeds for that I was going to be given for my dance or for my number was going to be given to an organization that supported Black trans women of color. Like that's what that night was for.
Yeah.
Both Cameron and I have pinned tweets on our Twitters where, like, in my case, I tell clients, like, I will give you this percentage of a discount if
Oh
you,
my.
if
I
you,
saw that on your Twitter. I was like, holy fuck,
if
that's
you
amazing.
show me, yeah, if you show me a receipt saying that like you donated to Black Lives Matter or some similar organization, some reparations based organization that is like fulfilling a social justice mission, like I will give you this percentage of a discount because that's what I can do as a white person who owes reparations and who wants to contribute to social justice. I mean, Cameron has a similar pin that you can speak to for yourself.
And yeah, mine is like I developed mine like when right after George Floyd was murdered and we were all in crisis. It was almost immediately after we moved into Portland and we were trying to figure out our sex work situation, and my pin still stays the same even though like maybe our landscape's changed a little bit. Like our landscape has changed the same, but like other people's hasn't. Um and it won't for a long long time. It hasn't for a long long time.
Yeah.
But mine says, hey, because a lot of people at that time had to move on to video content, had to move into, you know, OnlyFans and whatever.
Yeah.
I said, I will shoot a porn with you. I will let you take pictures of me. And if you are a Black person, if you are BIPOC, you take all the credit for it, however much money it makes. Like, I'm willing to sell my body for you. And if you're not a BIPOC person, we agree to donate all the proceeds of whatever content we come up with to donate that to some organization that is actually like helping BIPOC families, people, etc.
This is great. I feel like if this were to happen in the '60s, black people wouldn't be able to vote definitely sooner, for
That's
sure.
all we can do. Like every person, for us, as white people with privilege, like we have to be thinking about like what do I have access to that other people don't, and how can I contribute? And like, you know what? Like finances and monetary, even though like we don't have a lot of money, but like that's a really needed resource to actually get change done.
For
You know,
sure.
like this is what I can do this month. Maybe it'll
Does
be different next month, but this is what I can do.
does it feel any different living in Portland? I know they've kind of had like this like protest going on pretty much since like this George Floyd stuff has happened. How is it living? I guess is I guess does the news portray it any differently than it is in terms of like the heightened sense of like I guess tension in Portland? Do you feel that at all?
It's hard to say because we only live in Portland and we don't know what the rest of the news is saying. But we did spend multiple weeks under what we call helicopter duress,
Okay, yeah.
where we we will admit we did not choose to go to the front lines of protesting for various reasons in our life.
I mean, I
But
would fucking y'all wild in Portland. I wouldn't be doing that shit.
I mean,
I
but
mean,
we did
I've
we
done it
ran,
before,
yeah,
but
like, it's not like we were afraid of it, like, there was just certain circumstances in our life that we couldn't do it, but we ran, recon, evacuation missions, and other things, so, like, we were involved in the protests, but we were not, like, the people getting tear gassed, and
Yeah, I mean everybody does what they can do. It's like
we were the people driving our car because a lot of our friends who were protesting didn't have a car or didn't have a way to get out of downtown once they were tear gassed and feeling terrible. So we literally rode a car that was full of like candy and water and tear gas abatement into downtown, picked people up and drove back across the river.
hell yeah, that's awesome.
And then that's what we did on our days off. And so we were trying to do our best to support it, but like, yeah, we weren't downtown. And
But I mean, somebody has. I mean, that's awesome though.
everybody does their role,
right,
Yeah,
like,
I've
we
for
all have to
sure.
help the community.
yeah, like I feel like Cameron and I at this point in our lives, like we're the people warming and stirring the soup when you come back from doing
Yeah,
that line work, or we bring you in, we take you out, or we patch you up, we caretake you, we heal you. Like those are kind of our roles. Like I've done frontline work and been at the front of protests and planned them and all of that stuff earlier in my life, and it's just you just pass the torch. Like it's not
yeah,
everybody's supposed to be doing the same thing forever. We can
yeah,
take on different roles, and nobody needs to hear our white voices anymore. Like it's not about us. Like we don't need to be behind any megaphones. We need to be putting, like, if we're going to be on the front lines, we need to be putting like our bodies in front of black and brown bodies. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that's what's actually asked of at this time. But yeah, there was like, just wrapping up around your question, like there was like a profound sense of tension that went on for a long time. But we were talking to this guy. He was a tall black guy who worked for like the city of Portland, and he was working on a corner, and we were just talking to him and shooting the shit with him, and we were just like saying, this is just what it's like in black neighborhoods all the time, like
Yeah,
helicopters and all sorts of shit. It's just new to us because we've been privileged. Like we didn't have to hear helicopters every night until 4 in the morning. But if you grew up in Compton, you did. Well, and I had friends who were from Inglewood and places like that, and it's like this is just what it was like, you know.
yeah.
So I think it really just depends on your positionality. Like, yeah, there was like we have a very highly documented like racist police uh, bureau. You know, Trump sent in federal officers, all sorts of stuff, and like you did get like a lot of heightened, unnecessary escalation of tension. You know, that was really kind of coming more from the institutions and less from the protesters themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of that in cities where it's like the protesters are protesting and then fucking shit comes down and then it's the police or whoever that are definitely, I guess, provoking shit more than the people that are peacefully
Yeah.
protesting.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree, and you know that's no different from the '60s as well.
Yeah,
You know, it's but yeah, I mean, it's
we'll
just
be good. We'll get through this, Theo. We'll get through this.
I mean, we have no choice. We have no choice. Like we're kind of here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like it's just we're just at a time of crucial cultural shift.
It really does feel like, especially like now with the election happening in a few days, it's like we're on the fucking verge of like so much change. It's like so wild. And like
Yeah.
no matter who wins, like some people are gonna be fucking mad, and some people are gonna be like super happy.
Well, the reality is like all of that tension that you're talking about, it lives in our bodies. You know, our bodies hold all of that.
Yeah,
And you know, from the positionality of a sex worker, like if you can help someone to bring, if you can bring down their nervous system so that they can kind of peacefully self-regulate and like be present in the present, which, you know, the present is kind of fucked and kind of intense, like that's a really valuable service to be offering people.
no doubt. Coming from like a pro dom background and then like transitioning kind of more into companionship, has that affected companionship at all, or like I guess influenced your companionship at all? Being a pro dom first.
I don't think it has. Actually, I think that's made our companionship better. We actually transitioned initially because, earlier in the conversation when you asked us like how did you feel a way to like maintain safety, or when you initially entered into sex work, like what does that look like for you? We chose pro dom work not only because we were highly skilled at it, because we've been doing it as a lifestyle BDSM couple for a long time and we had a lot of skills around it, but it was also because we could maintain the power physically.
Oh, okay, yeah,
But after a while, we also started getting into a lot of like, because what happens in BDSM is that like you start to, many of our clients, and we're actually like quite aficionados about fantasy work and creating stories and living stories out. So that came into play for a while. But it was funny because one night we said to one of our friends who had like an MFA in theater arts, and we were explaining what it was like to be a pro dom and or like a fantasy creator. And she was like, "Wow, you guys write the script, you're the actors, you're the directors, you are the executors. Whoa. Oh my gosh,
All
like
in one
you're
hour.
the producers." And I said, and our only response is, "Yeah." Like really said, "Yeah, uh-huh, all in 1 hour."
we are artists.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, and
We are
also,
artists and like we don't get regarded as that. And like, not that we don't have like, it is probably the deepest part of our heart. Like if someone called us tomorrow and said, "I want a BDSM session with you," we would be so fulfilled. And also like to have that be our full-time work became exhausting over time because we some days just wanted to be Riley and Cameron and not be mistresses.
yeah. Real quick, just to piggyback off of that, like our movement into companionship, that form of sex work, like really revolved around this theme of like, damn, like prodom is awesome, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of prep. You have to maintain a certain role that like may not be actually like who you are or how you identify. Like you're playing a role for someone else's fantasy, And being a companion means you get to be yourself. We just wanted to be ourselves. We're like, we could just like have fun and just be our natural selves. Like, why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah.
And what we found is that people would come to us as companions, but then they would also be interested, or they'd be curious about kinky stuff or something like that. They just like got through the door in a different way. Like it was a little like they weren't ready to walk into a dungeon or something like that. Like that was like a little overwhelming to them. But like they might like say, "Yeah, I want to like do this sort of like sexy stuff, but maybe I want you to tie me up, or maybe I want to do this." Or it's like, "Great. Been doing that for a long time. Happy to do that." So it's like it became it became their doorway into being able to be more creative, or maybe a little bit more vulnerable about curiosities that they had, that they wouldn't necessarily have been like ready to jump on by going and seeing a straight up pro dom.
I'm already coming to you for companionship, and then you already have that like Dom background. It's like I kind of want to get into it, and then you're already able to provide that service because you're so experienced, and I feel like it just like adds like versatility to what you're able to provide to like each client. You know?
Right. Like when you're a skilled pro dom, the biggest thing behind anything in BDSM is consent. And even if someone said, "Oh, like I see you guys have been pro doms for a while, um, sure, let me try this thing out," and then all of a sudden they are like, "Whoa, nope, this isn't what I want. I'm bailing out," and they say no. The gift that they get from being in an experience with us is like for us to say, "Okay, great." And also you're still here for 45 minutes, so now what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And there's no judgment, and we will listen to them, and we can try it out, and or maybe we spend another 30 minutes cuddling, and then they want to try it one more time before they go, if it's an hour session.
Yeah.
But who knows? But that's the thing around skill in any form of like physicality with other human beings is consent. And
Yeah.
people who practice BDSM practice consent really well most often,
Yeah.
especially those of us who are professional.
Yeah.
And and everything is uncertain. Like we had one client who thought he knew what he wanted, and it was a pretty radical request. Like we had to kind of like sit back and be like, "Are we down to do this or not?" And he sent us like 60 emails. I swear to God, like 60 like one
Oh
line
god damn.
email. He had this whole script, all this stuff, which we usually don't do highly scripted scenes. Like we find value in people being able to like let go and actually be kind of at the mercy of someone, and like give up that power exchange. But he had this very specific fantasy, and we prepared for it. It took a lot of preparation. We decided that we were down to do it, and then we started it, and it was this elaborate role play. And 5 minutes into it, it was too much for him. Like 5 minutes in, he like literally he safe worded by saying, "I'm safe wording," which is like, if you've ever been to like a kink party, or if you've ever been involved in kink, like you don't say usually you don't say
Yeah.
safe word.
I'm
Like
s- yeah.
you say red, or you say bubbles, or whatever the fuck your agreed upon safe word is. It's just this wild thing where he like totally bit off more than he can chew. His eyes were so much bigger than his stomach. And like it was fine for us. We're like, okay, like yeah, like what you were asking for was like kind of a lot, and we were kind of impressed that like that's something that you wanted to do, but and we were prepared to do that for you, but now here we are with 55 minutes left. You just paid us a lot of money to be here. Like what can we do for you to make this evening satisfying based on what happened, because that's just organically what happened.
Yeah.
But it didn't mean that anything went wrong. It just meant that it was different than what was expected. So it's like, okay, like, do you want us to fuck and you can watch us and jerk off? Do you want to like cuddle? Do you want to just sit and talk? because a lot of people, companionship means a lot of things. Sometimes people just like need someone to talk to as well. And so it's just, we just never know. I mean, that's just like the not knowing of life. Like there's a Zen saying where they say not knowing is most intimate.
Damn.
Yeah. And that shows up in sex work all the time.
Yeah.
Every time, I would say.
Do you feel like your views like on sex or sexuality have changed since starting sex work?
I mean, I think our views actually like informed our ability to be sex workers. Maybe this is I don't know, I've never actually asked other sex workers their truth about it, but like I was telling you when we were in New Mexico and I was like scratching my head and being like, we're kinky people. We have great underwear. What could we do for money? um like it was our sexuality, it was our way of being in the world, and our ability to be polyamorous and kinky and all the things that informed our ability to say, hey, like maybe other people would find value in this. Maybe other people would say, oh, wow, look at these cool people who are willing to like offer their time and energy and companionship, and or will be my pro dom or whatever to fulfill my needs. And we were like, okay, cool.
Hell yeah.
Maybe somebody will recognize us like financially because of who we already are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that like it's one thing to like hold a principle, it's another thing to live a principle. And
Yeah.
so like as people who are committed to autonomy and liberation in all of its forms and like practice kind of unlearning the various forms of oppression that all of us have inherited over hundreds and hundreds of years. We practice that in our polyamory, in our relationship anarchy. We practice that in our sex work. It's like, yeah, like sex and pleasure should be readily available and is a human birthright, and it's like, how am I actually putting my money where my mouth is? But and so like I think doing sex work was a natural extension of our beliefs and our practices. It's just a way that we could bring that energy into the world more and like support ourselves in a material way at the same time. I also think it's given us a lot of like insight into the ways that different types of people are oppressed around sex. Like I think cisgendered white men are actually like some of the most internally repressed and oppressed people around some of this stuff, like they're just so
Oh
shut
yeah.
into themselves,
Yeah, even though like
even though they have all
their
sorts
their
of
their
privilege.
overt behaviors in social paradigms in general are the most oppressive, but then they'll walk into a room with us and everything breaks down. And so all we can hope is that the work that we do with them is that they realize they're human and they're not suprahuman, and that when they walk back out of the room with us, that they maybe respect other people a little bit more,
Yeah.
regardless of their background.
Like you're just who you are and that's all you really can be, and you gotta accept that, and like you
Absolutely. Like
allowing them.
in certain ways, like I actually question whether people who request especially BDSM services, that they just feel so guilty and or so repressed around the ways in which they could actually show up for other people, that they need to come get their ass beat or get fucked really hard or get flogged for an hour or go through some age play recession thing so that they feel like they could walk out of the room, because we never just like beat someone up or fuck them and like send them out on the street. We do that and then we bring them back down to earth.
Yeah.
And I do believe that every single person we've ever taken care of, that we've ever been in space with, walks out of that room questioning the way in which they walk away and walk onto the rest of the earth.
That's powerful.
The thing that I would add to that is I want, for me, like when I work with people, like I want them to like be able to have the experience and know that they could have it in their life outside of their time with me. You know, like
Yeah.
if this is who you are, if this is your authenticity, if this is what your body loves, like I'm glad that you get to have that here, but how can we find a way for you to actually have that freedom in your life? Like that's
Yeah.
my that is also my hope for their like personal liberation, is that they could go out and be like, "Oh, and now I know about myself. How can I be more of myself as I move through this world? And how can I better respect, the authenticity of others as well?"
Just like allowing people to like find themselves and I guess discover more, yeah, like more of who they are, what they like, what they don't like. There's not many experiences or people like I guess meeting people to where you're able to discover that, but like you being able to then meet with you and you being able to give that to somebody, I feel like it's a super special thing, you know?
Absolutely. Especially if people come back on a repeated basis. When people come up to us and then we build a relationship, that's what gives us the opportunity to continue to work with them. Especially if we're talking about like a BDSM sense, especially if we're talking about white bodied people who are trying to overcome white privilege, white fragility, what have you. But having a relationship around, because 99% of our clients are cis male white bodied people.
Okay.
When those people invest in a relationship that is a power dynamic, that is something that puts them down, that makes them check themselves, that makes them question everything that they've ever done, everything that their ancestors have ever done, and that maybe after every session they walk out of the room as a better person who looks around at other people and questions how they treat them. Our work means 100% more than however much people donate to us.
Because you're changing people for the better.
We're
Or like
changing,
allowing them to change for
we
the
hope we're
better.
changing the world, because if somebody walks out of a room with us and questions power dynamics and the ways in which you walk through the world and the ways in which you treat other people, the ways in which you could be potentially treated by people and you have the ability to say no, and what it means to listen to the word no and stop, etc. Like,
Yeah.
so powerful. That is so powerful.
Where do you see yourselves in like 5 years?
I don't know
Still
where
Portland? Portland? You still in Portland?
physically physically, who knows? I mean, where does anyone see themselves in 2 years, right? uh,
No idea.
the world might blow up, I don't know,
That
but
asteroid's coming.
I think for me especially, and I think like Riley would follow along, because it's much easier to be a madam than it is to be an actual sex worker. But I and this work has always actually been weaved into the work that we've done, and it goes along the lines of social justice in the terms of weeding out the people who actually just want to be sex workers and want to be safe versus like people who are being trafficked,
Yeah.
or people who are working shit ass jobs and would be way better sex workers than they would be bartenders.
Yeah.
To give example. regardless of their gender, there's a whole landscape, and we're already looking at that. It's like because we've been in the industry for a long time, because we know exactly how to keep ourselves safe and how to keep other people safe, I see us in 5 years being in a situation where other young sex workers could call us up for refuge and or for advice and or maybe potentially pay us some sort of
Consultants.
consultants.
Good. Excellent
Exactly.
word.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Because we've been through it and we also like really care about them and we want them to be safe. We just want to keep everybody in the industry really safe and really quality and understand how people can get fucked over, etc., and not
Fuck yeah.
and avoid that and do better and like how do you get photos and all the things. And so yeah, it would be us being like virtual madams to all the sex workers to come in the future in the next 5 years
Yeah.
and
Fuck
whatever.
yeah.
It's not unlike the analogy that we were talking about protests. Like there's a certain time when you're on the front lines, and there's a certain time to step back and let other people do that.
Yeah.
Provide a supportive role, you know, and there's many types of supportive roles.
For
Um,
sure.
so as Cameron has mentioned, like training, guidance, eldership is a good word that I would use for it. But I also think like storytelling and like doing the advocacy work and like getting the world to understand like what value sex work actually has rather than stigmatizing it is really important. You know, we've been kind of co-writing very slowly like a memoir about our experiences, and Cameron came up with a great idea of, rather than it being kind of this narrative sort of story arc, that it instead be standalone chapters that are like nonfiction. They're based in our experiences, but they speak to a larger issue that's
Nice.
related to sex work. So whether it's sex worker safety, whether it's, you know, clients overcoming shame because they have religious trauma because they're recovering Catholics in Louisiana, like whatever it is, like, you know, that's another thing that myself as a writer and Cameron as a great like inspirer and muse and a writer as well, like that's a way that we can communicate this information to the world, and start to shift attitudes, because once you start shifting attitudes, that's when you get shifts in policy
Yeah.
and get things like decriminalization, which makes everyone safer.
I feel like, yeah, if you change minds and people, just like people that weren't receptive or didn't know about anything before, I feel like just like bringing light to things changes the way people feel about it. And they're able to like look at something like objectively and be like, oh my God, I didn't know that this is what this was, or this is like who sex workers are, or really anything, and fucking just fucking change minds. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I
And what
mean, sex workers and or clients, like I think we're all equal people. It's like all we're doing is looking for connection. All we're doing is looking for some way to meet our mutual needs. And often the clients have much more financial capability than we do and or can invest in being able to support their experience, but then they show up and we have a great time too. Like it's
Yeah.
not just about that. And I feel like both clients and sex workers get written off as terrible people, and they're actually just really good humans who actually know something about themselves, which means I need something in my life right now. I can invest in what I need for myself right now if I'm talking from the client perspective. And from the worker perspective, it's like I know what I need in my life right now. I know what I'm willing to tolerate right now. I know what my boundaries are right now. And here is what I'm willing to accept right now. And there's somehow creates a synergy, right? Like
Yeah.
between the client and the worker that says, what is valuable to me is valuable to you. And then we meet each other and we cast aside all the ways in which we met, which might be money, which might be time, which might be hotel rooms, whatever. But like we cast that aside, and then there's this space where we get to just be people together, experiencing something that we might have never experienced together before.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty. That is the beauty. And that is also the shame of why it's unfortunate for it to be illegal.
Yeah.
Because we should be able to do that. We should be able to do that thing.
It's literally helping people. Like
Like,
literally.
every fucking day. Like, that's how babies survive, is by being touched every single day.
Yeah.
And it's
Just
also how adults survive every single day.
yeah. Someone's got to do it, and appreciate y'all for doing it.
Yeah, and
Well, we
it's
get to
also
do
it's
it.
also not sacrificial. Like it's also not sacrificial. Like we are not doing this work because we're like, oh, we hope that we can help somebody feel better about themselves or feel better about their sexuality or feel better about either BDSM experience. We are but a vessel, and we have a lot of boundaries and we just want to meet people in places that they want to be. That would be our biggest gratuitous experience, is like that we meet each other exactly where we both needed to be.
Hell yeah. That was
Yeah,
great.
and we're contributing to each other's freedom and liberation.
Yeah. Fucking Riley, Cameron, I appreciate y'all coming on the podcast. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we really appreciate you having us, and like I'm glad that we got to be like really real about not just sex work, but like where it fits and how it's evolving and how it's existing and contributing to like to things as they are,
Yeah.
like because things are really tumultuous right now and uncertain, and there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of intensity, a lot of change, and none of this happens in a vacuum. I mean, this work is happening against this macro cultural backdrop that we're all part of, and it has a really healing and important role to play, and we can't pretend that the outside world isn't happening.
Yeah.
And
Because it,
sometimes having a sex work appointment uh, means that maybe you get to pretend for an hour that that's not going on so that your nervous system can calm down, you
yeah.
know.
So if anyone's flying into Portland anytime soon,
Hell yeah.
yeah, whatever you want.
Fuck yeah. You want to plug some social media websites or where people can find you before we get out of here?
I would say our main uh, website is girlfriends with an S, experiencepdx.com. That's where at the main homepage you can find tons of hot pictures of both of us
And
and
writings by both of
bios and
us,
all the
and
things. But at the bottom of that, there's like a pretty simple screening information
booking
submission, yeah,
form.
like a submission booking form.
Okay.
And that would be the easiest way to get a hold of us if you were like, damn, I heard that podcast, and by the way, I'm flying to Portland next week, I want to be with them. That's the fastest way to do it. We also have Twitters and Instagrams.
You can find those links on the website as well, but my Twitter handle is Riley Delacroix 1. That's spelled Riley Delacroix and the number 1. And Cameron's
Is Cameron CameronB PDX, both on Instagram and on Twitter.
and my Instagram is just Riley Delacroix, and Cameron's is CamBPDX.
Hell yeah. Well, I appreciate y'all coming on the podcast. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for your work as well and supporting sex workers in the industry and getting the word out. We've really appreciated our time with you.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah. Listeners, we'll be back later. That was my interview with Riley Delacroix and Cameron Beaumont. Riley, Cameron, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. That was so much fun. Listeners, they just plugged it. I will plug it again. You can find Riley on Twitter at Riley Delacroix1, on Instagram at Riley Delacroix. You can find Cameron on Twitter at CameronBPDX, on Instagram at CamBPDX. Their website, girlfriendsexperiencepdx.com. I will have links to all of those in the Libsyn page from this week, so make sure you hit that Libsyn page. Show them some love. As always, you can find us on Twitter, on Instagram at Full Service Pod. I am at Tank Funkadelic. If you enjoy the show, make sure you are following us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Make sure you subscribe. If you could hit us with a 5-star rating, write us a review. That would help us out so much. If you want to be on the podcast, if you want to hear anything talked about on the podcast, perhaps if you just want to write in, let us know how you're doing. Our email address, fullservicepod@gmail.com. Like I mentioned last week, Patreon is happening. It's dropping next Tuesday, November 24th. If you want to support the show, Patreon is a great way. We'll have exclusive content, exclusive interviews that we will not be able to hear just on the regular Tuesday episodes. It's behind a paywall, but hey, fucking subscribe. I will definitely plug it next week, and I'll have links to Patreon in the Libsyn page on our link tree, so you'll be able to sign up that way if you want to support the show. But this has been episode 62. I appreciate you being here. We will be back next Tuesday. I'm feeling a solo episode, might be an interview. Follow us on Twitter to find out. But I hope you have a great week. I feel like I always record these interviews, or not interviews, these intro and outros, and I feel like I never mention anything that's happening in the outside world. The fucking election was I guess fucking a couple weeks ago, and I recorded on Monday. And then Monday night, I'm like, oh shit, there's an election happening tomorrow. I don't talk about shit at all. It's I feel like I'm in my own fucking bubble, and then I'm like, oh, I should probably say something. But oh yeah, wasn't that election wild? Who, I don't know. But yo, have a good week. I will see you on Tuesday. Fucking hey, write a review. Fucking that'd be wonderful. I'll see you later. Peace. Full service.